Okay. Yes. Thank you, Leo, and welcome to everybody. I just took a quick glance at all the little pictures of you, and nice to see many familiar faces, and welcome to those of you who are joining us, maybe even for the first time. Well, I'd like to explore this theme, the risk of living together, through the idea of conviviality, which is living together, which has its risks, as we know. And let's start off with a, a, with a pessimistic statement, and we may end, hopefully, with a more optimistic one. And the pessimistic uh, statement is hell is other people. This is the most famous quote from a play that Jean-Paul Sartre wrote in 1944. And it's a play about three dead people who have been locked into a room together for eternity. And they are discovering what hell is about. It's actually his one of the characters says they have discovered that living together in these conditions is hell. Hell is other people. Doesn't matter about any punishments you might be receiving from outside. Um, but actually, I think we have to put that in context. And the context for Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, uh, is the idea of the regard. Imagine you're sitting on a train and you're just looking around and you focus on somebody sitting near you, opposite you maybe, and you're just looking at them. And you are objectifying them. Not in a necessarily a negative, bad way, but you're objectifying them. You're not conversing with them. You're not involved with them. You're not listening to them. You're just looking at them. And the imagine, on the other hand, that you're sitting on a train and you look up and you see that somebody is looking at you. Doesn't that feel different? And you think, why are they looking at me? What are they thinking about me? What's that about? So the key idea here, I think, is uh, the problem of objectifying each other, objectifying another person, or indeed a group of people. And we exist in Sartre's philosophy as objects in each other's perception. It's very difficult for us to get into the subjective mind and feelings of another person. Uh, we cannot see as they see. And if we feel ourselves objectified, then it changes our sense of self and it could make us feel very uneasy. So this is really what it's about. We have to remember that for Sartre, existence precedes essence. Existence is this objectified state, and I think there is another perspective that many of us would take is that there is something essential in the human, something essential that comes first, and out of that, of course, we live existentially with other people, with the conflicts and the challenges and the joys of life. So it's a question of perception, as always. But I think this idea of Sartre is relevant to uh, our contemporary dilemma and situation, which seems to have gathered momentum, accelerated in with such rapidity in recent years. Uh, just think of surveillance, how we are constantly being looked at by cameras uh, for our own safety, for our own security. You get into a bus, and the first thing you see is a little sign that says you are being filmed. So we're being surveyed. And then, of course, every time we go to Google and we type in something we're looking for, uh, we are being observed through infinitely fast algorithms. And the 21st century uh, has been gripped by this experience and fear of dehumanization. At the moment, we're projecting it onto what we call artificial intelligence, although whether we should call it intelligence at all is another matter. But we've been gripped by this fear, awareness that we're being objectified and exploited, of course. So this is the condition in which we find ourselves, and it's getting worse by all accounts. So how do we deal with it? All relationships have the tendency, and perhaps an inevitability, of coming into conflict. Even the most loving, kind, compassionate relationships, those we love most in the world, we have conflicts with them. There's the way in which the Jew and the anti-Semite relate, or the way black and white races, or rich and poor, or vice versa, of course, Muslims and non-Muslims, and so on, Catholics and Protestants, as we those those who were around in the UK during the times of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, bitterly, painfully aware of the of that of that tendency to conflict, even among close neighbors with more things in common, we would say, uh, than differences. So this is a tendency that we have to reckon with. Even in our closest and most loving relationships, there will be conflicts. But essentially, we are all equal. Equality is also a deep concern of the modern mind, and we've created many political groups and movements to affirm the different views, of course, of what equality is and how we achieve it or how we recognize it. Um, but we are essentially equal because each of us is a subject, not just an object of somebody else's hatred or disapproval or rejection, but we are subjects. We are capable to some degree, maybe to an infinite degree, of understanding each other, of feeling what the other person is feeling, and of listening to what the other person is saying. I want to come back to all of these elements of our conviviality, how we live together. But essentially, we start off as subjects, not existential objects. But this dilemma, how we remember this, how we remember and respect each other as not as objects, but as co-subjects, as it were, living together. This dilemma is integral to our human condition, and it's why the human condition has been marked by conflict and violence and ethnic cleansing and genocide for millennia. War seems to be integral to the human condition. Has manifested in extreme forms in modern times. We've had two unbelievably disastrous world wars. We have the Middle East conflict constantly breaking down, as we just heard in the news. The truce. Uh, we have also that's disturbing the very fabric of our Western democracies, the withdrawal of support for democracy. More and more people, especially and young people, are saying, uh, have lost faith, confidence in democracy. Um, Not that it is the perfect form of government, but as Churchill said, it's the best of all those available. And what happens when these these processes uh, get into an extreme mode, when they get out of control? And many people here in the States at the moment are feeling that that is what is happening at the very heart of government, with the ignoring of basic rules and boundaries and constitutional rules. Extreme polarization, extreme disrespect for law and those boundaries that make good neighbors, that allow us to moderate, to deal with conflict when it arises. The checks and balances that every relationship and every human form of society requires. So I'd like to look at three areas of life where we meet this crisis today, at some of its roots, and how we could hope. And hope is essential. That's what I hope this series during the coming year will be doing for us, is giving us ground for hope and substance to hope and intelligent ways of hoping. Um, how we could hope to reduce it. Maybe we can't stop it altogether. Maybe we can't put an end to violence and division and polarization, but we can reduce it and even maybe reverse it, cure it, and grow through it. So the first level I'd like to look at is what we might just say the personal level, personal relationships, and the choice of lifestyle that has never been greater and more varied for people in many parts of certainly the affluent world. You can choose to a certain degree. You can choose how you want to live and how you want to be seen, or how you want to be defined. In the affluent world, there's a strong movement away from living together, even physically living together. More and more people are living in big cities, of course, in alone. And big cities have always been places where, well, originally people went there for protection. They went there to find work. Uh, but the city is now a place where many people go uh, to be free, to develop their interests, their gifts. And but we find more and more single dwellings showing up in the demographics, in the statistics. Marriage rates have been declining for decades, although they go up and down. But basically, they have been declining. The birth rate, as we know, is is pretty low in most affluent countries. Now, there are many reasons for this, which are not all maybe bad. People sometimes stayed in very unhappy and painful marriages just because of social pressure. And now people are free to divorce and have another chance in life if they wish. But the lack of social pressure, the example of broken relationships and broken marriages, just think of how much of our idea of therapy is today is concerned with Well, perhaps the most profound concern that people have when they approach therapy is meaning. What is the meaning of what I'm going through? What is the meaning of life? But also, how can I live with other people? How can I deal with the wounds that I've endured through an unhappy family or through a bad marriage or whatever it may be? So the example of broken relationships and broken marriages, painful divorces, and of course behind all this is um, the decline of the religious option as a way of interpreting healing or giving meaning. For many people, this has broken down in the same way that democracy has lost its authority. And among young people, uh, we may or perhaps have met many young people who have lost faith in the institutions of society. They want to step out of the rat race. Uh, COVID seems to have accelerated this a great deal. So you meet many young people who work for a few months, make some money, then go traveling, and or even young couples or families who want to go off the grid. They don't want to be. They'd like to be alone, basically, living alone without social pressure or social control. And again, I think we have to recognize the spirit of freedom in this, but also at the same time, the implications of this on this scale are quite serious. And for many young people at a very young age now, as we know, social media and pornography have devastated their capacity to make relationships, to enter into healthy and life-giving relationships, and to deal with conflict and the way they see relationships from a very early age. Many, of course, make a limited commitment, uh, commitment to another person, a significant other, a partner. But the idea of a spouse, a lifelong spouse, is has reduced, um, and there's a big step, of course, in a relationship when a couple decide to move in together, not getting married, not having children, but just moving in together. That can be, when you speak to couples who are thinking about that, you realize how much they are aware of the risk they're taking. So in all of these areas of the personal, of the human relationships, we see the prevalence of the sense of risk and the fear of being hurt, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of coming out badly. Now, although this there's a certain truth in all of this, we remain incurable romantics, uh, imagining, hoping, pursuing the ideal permanent partner. Um, uh, they're still making or remaking films of Jane Austen novels, although I don't think Jane Austen was a romantic writer at all. She just had happy endings, which I hope we will end with today as well. So happy endings are not necessarily romantic. Indeed, all the great spiritual traditions do see human destiny as having a happy ending, but not a happy ending that doesn't take us through the risk of living together and the conflict of misunderstanding and objectification. At the personal level, we are acutely aware then of the risks of living together. The hell of a bad marriage, the hell of a broken relationship. So in that sense, Sartre's Sartre's character has a point. Hell can be other people. On the other hand, there's something in us that makes us human that we know we need to manage this risk. We need to understand the risk and we need to take the risk. Otherwise, something human in us begins to shrivel. Part of the risk is being overwhelmed by our need, our emotional need, our human need, uh, in confronting basic human loneliness. And then, when we are overwhelmed by that, we become very vulnerable to two mistakes. One is to idealize a person or a situation, or we'll see in a moment, maybe a political party, by idealizing a possible escape from this dilemma of human loneliness. Idealization happens when, as a natural stage of some relationships, I will never have to be alone ever again. All my needs have been met. I have found what I have been looking for, who I've been looking for. And this is often the romantic or the erotic stage of love. It's based upon very powerful forces of attraction and is sacred and blessed in itself. But it is not the end of the process of becoming human or of making relationships or of living together. So what happens very quickly is that idealization, you put somebody on a pedestal, it may be a religious leader, it may be a political leader, it may be a romantic partner. You put them on a pedestal, idealize them, um, and then you begin to see they have feet of clay, that they have their problems, they have their, and you have differences, serious differences between you. And that disillusionment where we are, the illusion has been broken down, that is a good thing in itself, but the disillusionment can be very painful and make us very angry and feel betrayed by the other person. And then we move from idealization to demonization. The other person becomes the absolute epitome of hell, of the demon. The word demon, of course, comes from an ancient root that means separation, isolation, and division. When we demonize, then we are at this risk of losing conviviality, of even being able to live with the other person. I can't live with you anymore. And actually, I don't even want you to be alive anymore. I would prefer you all to be uh, wiped out or sent away from your homeland, as we are hearing recently at the moment. So this is followed by challenges that by the challenge that the idealized person is not a projection of your fantasy, is either good or bad. This other person is a unique and infinitely unique and valuable person in their own right. So love is the art of conviviality, and learning to love your enemies is an essential part of living together on this little planet. Love does not mean objectifying freezing another person as an object of our fantasy, imagination, or the satisfaction of our hopes and dreams and desires. But we're not freezing them in our own image. So we're challenged by the process of relationship, of growing in human relationship, challenged to truly see, and accept them as unique, existing in their own right. Other than us, yes, but at the same time, not an object of our projected fantasies, good or bad. And then if we allow this process, this personal process, a deeply human process of relationship to unfold, then we move into this realm that of friendship, which we have devalued in our culture very much. We've eroticized relationships to such a degree that we think that intimacy depends upon uh, erotic relationships. It's part of it, yes, of course, but uh, friendship, which for the ancient wisdom was the highest form of human relationship, and this is what you see in a married couple after 60 years of marriage together. You know, they've gone through a lot together, and in the end, you can feel this wonderful friendship that has evolved uh, over time. And then the third stage, which requires another dimension of of understanding the human, agape, the, the discovery of boundless love, of divine um, creative love. So that's at the personal level. I think we can see the challenges we're facing in terms of living together and dealing with the risks of living together. Another aspect of it is that I think we need to explore is community. One of the consequences of the breakdown of democracy, faith in democracy, has been the sense that people are living in a society and a socio-economic complex organism, as we call society, um, but they feel alone. They feel uh, disconnected, especially in big urban conglomerates. And the experience of community, the loss of the experience of local community, has touched, I think, the young especially. And I heard of a daughter of a friend of mine recently was asked at school. They were asked to say what were their ambitions as they came to leave school, and she had written to be a local, to to be a local. And you're not local on Facebook, you know, you're wherever you are, you're not local. Um, and to be local has a physical dimension. Uh, that physical dimension has to be reconciled with the global dimension of our media, of our types of communication, of what we're doing now, in fact. I mean, there is a connection between us uh, on at this moment uh, as we reflect on these issues. There's a real connection. And when we meditated together a little time ago, there was a real connection. I just no doubt discovered that, and why many meditation groups have gone online. But I don't think it's the whole shebang. I don't think it's the whole picture. I think we also need the reassurance that we are embodied beings and that we could, each one of us, meet one day, whether it's at Bombo or whether it's at a cafe or wherever it may be, that we have also this capacity to be together and know each other, see each other in the round, with that embodied dimension. So the loss of community uh, is a serious issue for our living together. I often think of, these world leaders that we're reading about every day who are trying to trying to solve global issues or local conflicts to their own advantage, places they've never visited, dealing with groups, ethnic groups and interest groups that they've never met, they've never heard them speak. It's all in some kind of board game or some kind of, of course, geopolitical game. So I'm going to suggest, as you might guess, that the best wisdom of living together in community and managing the risk of living together is the rule of St. Benedict. I mean, the best in the sense that it's the cheapest to buy, it's only a very short, and it's very simple to read because it's not theoretical. It's 90% of it is practical. Written in the 6th century, it wasn't, I don't think it was written with this in mind. I think it just flowed from the wisdom of Benedict's experience and the conditions of the time, which were in many ways like our own, a time of social, political, and economic uh, dissolution and breakdown. The rule of St. Benedict encompasses all of these three dimensions of love that I've mentioned. From the romantic, I mean by that, when somebody comes to join a monastery, I did when I joined the monastery, I fell in love with everybody there. I thought they were the most wonderful, holy, enlightened people I could ever meet. And it's what Benedict calls the first fervor of conversion. You just see the good and the wonderful, and and of course, then I don't know how long it took, but little by little, you begin to see these are very human beings, very human. And then you'll say, look, oh my God, they've been living this life for 30 years and this is what they're like. So you go to the other extreme. Anyway, Benedict accounts for all of this process, and he sets up a way of approaching the experience of living together, which allows you to grow, to progress from one level of human relationship to the other. You go through also, as he recognizes, the rebellious phase, where you're part of this community, but you're a rebel. You want to push against it. You don't like the rules. And you say, well, that's not for me. Uh, and then that might lead you to leave and say, it's not for me. I can't put up with this. Or it might be your destiny to grow through that rebellion of the ego against other people that you are living closely with, not easy, and to achieving the indescribable sweetness of love that St. Benedict says at the beginning of his rule. There's going to be a little discipline at first, he says, if you're going to live this life, if it's meant for you. Uh, but then you will discover the indescribable sweetness of love. The magic key in Benedict's vision is obedience, which is not a very popular modern uh, concept. We prefer freedom, personal freedom, to do what I want to do. Maybe there are some constraints upon it, but I basically have the right to do what I want to do. So obedience is very badly misunderstood, as we can see in the present political chaos that we're going through. Obedience is basically about not submission of your will to another person's, but a deep listening. So the beginning of the rule, the first word of the rule is listen, ascolta, ascolta. Listen, my child, to the teaching, to the precepts of your teacher, and incline the ear of your heart. So we need to highlight this element of listening, of obedience to the to the to those we are living with, and to those who are teaching us as well. And disobedience essentially then means the inability to listen at the necessary depth, because listening is about attention. And we know that under the forces of social media and the forces of the speed of life that we're enduring and our chronic distraction, the ability to pay attention for a sustained amount of time is dropping by the day. Our attention span, and many young is really in trouble. And many young people are aware of this, interestingly. And I think we've all experienced it, both we know ourselves, how easily distracted we can be. But in a conversation you're having with people, you're exchanging thoughts, plans, or whatever it may be. And then you realize the other person hasn't been listening. I mean, I'm talking about seconds, not minutes, that they just missed something important that you said, or you missed what they said. And they ask a question, which you just, you have to learn through the art of conversation, which we'll come back uh, to listen. The rule of St. Benedict is a very subtle but a very practical system describing a way of living together. Of course, has to be interpreted 1,500 years later, but a very practical system of checks and balances and of essential principles or virtues, you might say, of what living together means. For example, requiring discipline, self-discipline, one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, according to St. Paul in the letter to the Galatians. Self-control, discipline, and to allow the risk, all of this, to allow the risk of living together to be navigated, because it can be risky and stormy. The most common mistake in community is to see the community as if it was a family or the family you didn't have. In the same way you might marry a man or a woman because it's the father or the mother you didn't have. And to react to that painful discovery that they are not, it is not what you had hoped or imagined, in community experience, you can withdraw, you can retreat into false obedience, superficial obedience. One of the memorable phrases of St. Benedict is never give a false peace. Never let the sun go down on your anger. Don't pretend that there isn't a problem if there is a problem, because otherwise you will end up living as polite strangers, as sometimes happens in loveless marriages. John Maine once said that he'd never met so many egoists as in religious communities. It's the danger of community is that it can become a refuge in which you can find what you're looking for and what you want to do, negotiating a little bit here, a little bit there, but missing the point that the the goal of the communal experience is uh, is a freedom from the ego, not a protection of the ego or a hiding of the ego. And for John Maine, and in our experience, community, uh, the, the 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 way to avoid that risk of living together, of just becoming polite strangers, is meditating together. Because it's a curious fact, you can't hate someone and meditate with them. Maybe you can for 2 or 3 days, or you can't refuse to forgive or refuse to communicate with another person. Uh, you can't refuse to see them as the unique, sacred person they are for very long. Either you'll give up meditation, or you may uh, not just say, I can't live with you. I can't live this way. Marriages and communities can become lonely prisons. And there's maybe part of that is the cause of the decline of many forms of community. In the 60s, 70s, there was the great commune experiment in many parts of the world, living together, sharing everything, very idealistic, the kibbutz idea. And I remember speaking to an Israeli friend once and who had been brought up in a kibbutz and had very happy memories of it in the early days. And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "Well, it's easy to share everything when you have nothing. But when you have a lot, then sharing becomes really difficult." So uh, community is a hunger for many people in our world. They want to have this connection, not necessarily in religious communities or in monasteries, but they want to have an experience of being a local, of belonging to and sharing in a vision, in a life, and in a work that that can unite the community. As I said, we always have to keep aware of the risk of the uh, of the recurrence of the human condition of loneliness. And in communities, you might find someone who says, "Oh, I prefer to meditate on my own." And you say, "Why?" And they say, "Well, I meditate better on my own." And the essence, though, of a contemplative community that meditates together, this was this is something that our community uh, focuses on, and Bombo does. It is meditating together that makes the difference. It's what makes the community that you physically meditate together as a daily norm practice. And then what you discover is that loneliness is a failed solitude. When you feel lonely, you can identify it as a failure of solitude. And solitude is the discovery and the embracing of your own uniqueness. That's the beginning of conviviality, solitude, that you discover, maybe with a little tremor of anxiety, that you are indeed unique, not isolated. And then you discover that that uniqueness gives you a solitude which enables you to make deeper relationships, more meaningful and authentic relationships. Maybe not so many, but deeper and more authentic ones. So meditation creates community for that very reason, because it invites us into this transformative experience of solitude, which I'll come back to in a moment. There are many life expressions of solitude. You may be living on your own. You may be a hermit in the top of a mountain or in a cave, or you may be living in a community uh, with a well-integrated, healthy personality, which is not projecting or objectifying onto others. So the third element, dimension I'd like to look at is political. What has gone wrong with our politics? Why can politicians no longer seem able to help us to live together? That's surely their responsibility, to help us to live together. And the problem is not differences of opinion. Human beings are always going to have conflicts of opinion, but how we express these differences. That's the problem. Polarization, demonization, rejection, disrespect for conventions and boundaries, legal and moral. And there are many aspects to this. We're in the middle of a huge political crisis. But let's just focus on one key point that has become obvious, and that is the destruction of the art of conversation. Debates in democratic assemblies were meant to be debates, expressing different points of view, but not shouting matches, not insulting matches. They were meant to be a form of conversation. They could be continued after the public debate over dinner or a walk together. Conversation. And the enemy of conversation is interrupting. And we're going to have a little interruption now to give you an example of what interruption means. Thank you, Leah.
Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Vote now. Are you going to pack the court? Make sure you, in fact, let people know you're a senator. I'm not going to answer the question.
Why wouldn't you answer that question?
The question is, the question is,
Justice, radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe? You didn't want me to ban China, which was heavily infected. You didn't want me to ban.
All right, gentlemen,
which was heavily infected. You would have been much later, Joe.
Mr. President,
much later.
Mr. President,
you're talking about 2 million people.
You're not
President, as the moderator.
Why is it on the ballot? It's not on the ballot.
Good. I think you get the point. This is a presidential debate to give people the chance of choosing the most powerful person in the world in political terms. And could you make any sense of that? So, and it's rampant in our politics. Shouting, violent, confused, pandemonium, and it expresses itself in the same way in social media. The extreme social media where people threaten to kill the person they disagree with or attack their families and so on. So change, evolution, compromise, living together happens in conversation, which demands St. Benedict's key virtue of listening. Listening supported by the discipline of certain standards and of certain needs of correction at times. I spoke to somebody who's been in the field of climate change for many years, and he told me that in all these years of going to meetings, endless meetings, he'd never found anyone who changed their mind as a result of a meeting. It's pretty horrific, isn't it? Never anyone changed their mind. And the reason is they come with their talks, their speeches prepared, and they're given very strict instructions about what they can say by their governments. So there is no conversation. It's just, I mean, and my friend has begun to take the risk of suggesting that they begin their meetings with a short period of meditation. And usually this is welcomed, and the people will notice that the meeting goes better, they're more respectful, there's a deeper personal trust, and they listen to each other better. So how do we deal with this phenomenon of individualism, which is the inability to listen and the loss of the art of conversation? Just shouting down your opponent and interrupting them, even denying them the right to speak, that is a key issue in our culture and our world that we're all aware of and we're all guilty of. So I think we should be aware that we're interrupting. We should adjust to the way another person may speak, or the speed at which they'll speak. And we should really be interested in what they're saying, not just try to be interesting or try to win the argument even before two sides of the argument have been expressed. And if you do interrupt, just say, "I'm sorry, I interrupted you, carry on." All of this allows us to see the fruits of listening and the profound effect this has upon our ability not just to have a conversation, but actually to live together. We see the same, I think, issue at work in the way journalists conduct their interviews, continually interrupting the politician or whoever it may be they're interviewing. And the anger at when you are interrupted, the feeling of being disrespected, ignored, rejected, the huge mistake that Hillary Clinton made when she called Trump supporters deplorable people. But this will lead to polarization, and polarization leads to violence. So just to summarize this, solitude is the fruit of discovering in silence and solitude and in the circumstances of life our uniqueness. And that is the basis of relationship and living together. And solitude has been lost in our technological society. We don't have time. St. Benedict says in chapter 26, the monastery should, if possible, so be constructed that in it all necessities, water mill, garden, and the crafts can be practiced there, should be contained. He says there's no need for the monks to roam outside because this is not good for their souls. He's talking about gyrovags, not sannyasis. So It's a practical ideal of community in which we can learn conviviality and learn to manage the risks of living together. The virtues there are moderation, conversation, consultation. Benedict says even the youngest person in the community should be asked to express their opinion. Reading, the art of reading has been lost along with conversation. Most people get their stimulus and then information from YouTube rather than reading. Sleep, lectio, work, balance of life. So I'd like to look at a couple of more things and then we'll conclude. The first is the spiritual dimension, the practice of silence and solitude, contemplative practice. This is not to be confused with individualistic practice of just calming the mind or just feeling better. It's a good thing to calm the mind. It's a good thing to feel better, of course, but that isn't essentially what contemplative practice means. The danger of we face is of reducing contemplative practice to a form of individualistic well-being. And then you stop there. When you've got it, when you feel better, you don't need to go any further. Whereas a contemplative practice is inviting you always to go further and to go beyond the ego. Any contemplative practice, like meditation, as many of us will know, both needs community, we need the support of it, we benefit from the support of it, and it also creates community, which is a very healthy, it's like having a community, a monastery where everything you need is there. It's creating what it needs. It's self-sufficient in a recyclable way. When we meditate in the way that I was talking about earlier, we don't shout the mantra. We listen to it. But we also experience interruption. Maybe it's an interior interruption coming from our untrained and disorganized and chaotic minds. When we practice meditation, the first thing we discover is that it is not easy to be simple, to say the mantra faithfully. We become distracted, and the way through is not to shout, not to run away, but to be faithful, to stay with it, to be patient, and to grow in gentle strength. This involves the risk of letting go of our own self-objectification. We think about ourselves all the time. Am I happy? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? What shall I do next? The risk of letting go of thinking about ourselves. And it's in this understanding that contemplation can be seen as the foundation of living together. Indeed, contemplation is the foundation of civilization. John Main said that when we meditate, we take the risk of letting go of ourselves before the other appears in their wonderful uniqueness, and without any prepackaged guarantee that they will that it will appear. That's the risk. The bottom line of the risk of living together is letting go of ourselves before the other appears. I've read a novel recently, some of you may have read it, called Orbital. And it's a You read it? I can see some people smiling. It's a short novel, and it doesn't have a plot or a murder mystery or anything. It's about 6 astronauts circling the Earth in the International Space Station. 4 men, two women, you know, Japanese, American, British, Italian, and Russian. And they're rotating around the planet at 16,000 miles an hour in a little sardine can. And their whole experience of time and space is, of course, transformed. They're living with a geological calendar, which 438 years is worth 1 cosmic second, or 1.5 million years is 1 cosmic hour. And it reminds me of the verse from the Psalms: "One day in your courts, O Lord, is worth more than 1,000 elsewhere." It's claustrophobic, of course, and they're living with dehydrated food. They are working all the time, filling out their worksheets and doing the things they have to do. There's no idleness, but there's not much time for leisure. But the way that this is described is quite extraordinary. And it's not religious, but it's, I would say, very essentially contemplative. It shows the individual and the collective coexisting. And not just by, you know, okay, I'll have to put up with you for the next 6 months while we're up here, but actually discovering something. They discover solitude and intimacy. They discover that the alternative to loneliness is mutual dependence, interdependence. This is a little quote. At first on their missions, they each miss their families, sometimes so much that it seems to scrape out their insides. Now, up there, out of necessity, they've come to see that their family is this one here. These others who know the things they know and see the things they see, with whom they need no words of explanation. When they get back, how will they even begin to say what happened to them? Who and what they were? They want no view except this view from the window of the solar array as they taper into emptiness. The other interesting description of this experience, I mean, the author, Samantha Harvey, was not an astronaut. This is a huge work of imagination based on a lot of research. She says, at some point in their stay in orbit, there comes for each of them a powerful desire that sets in, a desire never to leave, a sudden ambushing by happiness, a sudden ambushing by happiness. They find it everywhere, this happiness, springing forth from the blandest of places, from the experiment decks, from within the sachets of risotto and chicken cassoulet, from the panels of screens, switches and vents, from the brutally cramped titanium and steel tubes in which they're trapped. Everything that speaks of being in space, which is everything, astonishes them with happiness. And it isn't so much that they don't want to go home, but that home is an idea that has imploded, grown so big so distended and full that it's caved in on itself. I think it's a remarkable capturing of a contemplative consciousness and experience. And it is stimulated by the contemplation of nature, by their looking out of these windows and seeing the sheer heartbreaking beauty of this little blue planet. And the happiness that that brings, the togetherness that brings. And this is an extraordinary moment where she says, that it is a floating family, but in some ways they're not really a family at all. They're both much more and much less than that. They're everything to each other for this short stretch of time, because they are all that is. They are companions, colleagues, mentors, doctors, dentists, hairdressers. On spacewalks, launches, re-entry, in emergencies, they are each other's lifeline. They are each to the other a representative of the human race. They each have to suffice for billions of people. So, as she points out, this is a sense of attention and servitude, a sense of worship. And no artificial intelligence, machine, or robot could experience or communicate this. It's above all, I think, the beauty of Mother Earth, and she speaks a lot about this, seeing the earth as our mother. That's what the mystical tradition calls the contemplation of nature, which is the foundation for our contemplation of God. But this isn't, they also can see the effects of politics and pollution on this beautiful Mother Earth. So this is not just the first phase of a relationship. This is a perception of the harm we are doing to ourselves and to the place we belong. So I'd like to end there by this conclusion then would be that it's somehow by rediscovering, maybe outside of a religious context, rediscovering what contemplative consciousness means, what our minds truly are and who we truly are. And it's in this that we will come to the self-knowledge that changes us, changes the way we listen, changes the way we relate, changes the way we understand. Patanjali, a great Indian teacher, said, "Watch your thoughts. They become your words. Watch your words. They become your actions. Actions become your habits. Watch your habits, because they become your character. And watch your character, because it becomes your destiny." So it's this self-knowledge, self-awareness, not egocentric self-awareness, but this contemplative expansion of consciousness that allows us to live together to the fullest possible degree. And when I read that description in this novel, Orbital, I was reminded of a passage from the 12th century monk Elder de Rivo, famous for his books, his two books on spiritual friendship and The Mirror of Charity. And friendship was at the heart of his experience of community life and monastic life, but the heart also of his theology. He says, if we can say God is love, we can also say God is friendship. And this is how he describes an experience of it one day. The day before yesterday, I was walking the round of the cloister in the monastery. The brethren were sitting around, forming a most loving circle. I found no one whom I did not love, and no one by whom I felt sure I was not loved. I felt such joy that it surpassed all the delights of the world. So, heaven is other people, if we get there.